The sun hadn't yet climbed above the jagged ridges when the train screeched to a halt in Duston Ridge, a dusty, wind-bitten town deep in the Arizona territory. Evelyn Rosewood stepped down from the passenger car with a worn leather valise in one hand and the edge of her veil clenched tightly in the other. Her pale blue dress, wrinkled from days of travel, stood out among the muted browns and grays of the onlookers. She was out of place, and she knew it, but that was exactly the point. Charlotte wasn't just fleeing a city, she was fleeing a name. Langford, once synonymous with old money and prestige in Boston's highest circles, had become her chain. The whispers, the scandal, the shame. Duston Ridge was her chance to vanish into the dust. Waiting at the end of the platform was a man, tall, lean, eyes like cooled ash beneath the rim of a wide hat. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once and said, "Graham Whitlock." She hesitated, then took his hand. It was rough, strong, not cruel but not gentle either. He lifted her suitcase with ease and motioned toward the wagon waiting near the hitching post. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, the wagon creaking along a winding dirt road lined with dry mesquite and red rocks. Charlotte tried once or twice to speak, polite questions, observations about the land, but Daniel only responded with short answers. Yes, no, sometimes not at all. It wasn't rudeness, it was something deeper, guarded. When they arrived at the ranch, he pulled the horses to a stop in front of a modest wooden house. The land stretched wide behind it, cattle fencing, a half-collapsed barn, and endless sunburned plains. Before helping her down, Daniel turned to her. "Before you step inside, you need to know something." Charlotte met his eyes, heart kicking. "I don't ask about the past," he said, "and I don't want to be asked about mine. That's how this works. If you're staying." There was no malice in his voice, but no room for negotiation either. Charlotte nodded, understood. That very evening they were married in a small government outpost by an old, half-deaf preacher and a drunk who acted as witness. No music, no dress, no kiss, just signatures, a deal. Daniel didn't share her bed that night, he simply showed her to a room with a hand-sewn quilt, a cracked mirror, and a window facing the fields. "We start early," he said. "Work waits." Charlotte sat at the edge of the bed long after he closed the door. Her fingers traced the faded embroidery of the pillowcase. She listened to the coyotes outside and the wind slipping through the boards. This was her new life. She had left corsets and chandeliers behind, left marble staircases and champagne flutes, left betrayal and humiliation, and a father who would rather see her married off to a monster than forgive a single misstep. And in this place, this quiet, bone-dry stretch of nowhere, no one knew her name, no one cared what had happened in Boston, no one asked. But there was something else too, something unsettled. As Charlotte laid back and stared at the wooden beams above, one thought haunted her more than all the silence. She had escaped one kind of prison, only to walk straight into another, one where questions were forbidden, and secrets never died. The rooster crowed before dawn, its cry echoing across the still dust-choked plains. Charlotte sat up slowly, the heavy quilt sliding off her shoulders. Her back ached from the hard mattress, her limbs sore from days of travel. She hadn't truly slept, not with the wind howling through the rafters and Daniel's words echoing in her head. No questions. She dressed in silence, pulling on the simple skirt and blouse she'd found folded on a chair beside the bed, too big and worn at the seams, but clean. Someone had made sure she'd what she needed. Someone who never smiled, never asked, never answered. Outside, the ranch was already alive. Chickens clucked near the coop. A dog barked at something, unseen in the distance. And there he was, Daniel moving with quiet efficiency across the yard, leading a young mare to water. Charlotte approached cautiously, unsure of the rhythm of this new world. "Good morning," she offered. He didn't look at her. "Grab a bucket." She did. They worked side by side for hours, speaking only when necessary. Feed here, water there, muck out the stalls, tie off the fence line. Her hands blistered quickly, unused to this kind of labor, but she didn't complain. She never had. Not even in Boston, especially not in Boston. Their complaint was weakness. Emotion was liability. Her mother had taught her that with tight smiles and tighter corsets. Her father, through silence, through rules, through the eyes of every man he brought to dinner, each one assessing her like livestock. And then came Harold, the son of a shipping tycoon, 30 years her senior, with breath that reeked of whiskey and hands that lingered too long. Her father's business depended on that. Marriage. Charlotte's obedience was non-negotiable, so she ran into a whirlwind of night trains and borrowed names until she found a newspaper ad. Rancher seeking wife, no past required, no questions asked. It had felt like fate. Now it felt like a gamble. Later that afternoon, she sat on the porch steps, nursing her raw palms with a damp cloth. Daniel walked past with a sack of oats, paused and glanced at her hands. "You'll toughen up," he muttered, "or you'll break." Then he walked away. It wasn't cruel, just honest. And in some strange way Charlotte appreciated in more than all the hollow flatteries she'd endured back east. Graham Whitlock didn't pretend, didn't perform, but what was he hiding? That night over a dinner of beans and cornbread he spoke without looking up. "You don't have to like it here, you just have to stay." Charlotte set her fork down slowly. "I didn't come here for comfort." He met her eyes for the first time that day, and something flickered behind them. Recognition maybe, or warning. "Good," he said, then silence again. She stared at him across the flickering lamplight. He wasn't cruel, but something about him was bruised, like a man who'd stopped believing in softness long ago. She wanted to ask, "What happened to you?" but the rules were clear, and the truth was she wasn't ready to be asked either. The third morning came colder than expected. A thin veil of frost clung to the windows, and the wind had shifted, biting and impatient. Charlotte wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and padded barefoot across the creaky floorboards of the ranch house. The silence was a presence now, thick, almost sentient. She moved carefully, exploring more than she had the days before. The kitchen was spare but clean, the pantry half-stocked, the furniture worn but not neglected. A man lived here alone for a long time. That much was clear, but there were boundaries. Doors that didn't open, cabinets with rusted locks, a staircase to the attic with a latch nailed shut. She didn't push it, not yet, but the house was whispering around her. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind beneath the doorframe seemed to say, "There's more here than you're allowed to see." Daniel was gone early that day. He'd left a note on the table. "Fence line, back by noon." Short to the point, no signature. She spent the morning gathering eggs and sweeping the porch, trying to busy her hands, but her mind wandered. That attic, those locked drawers, the things he refused to speak of. After lunch, she wandered back inside to wash the dishes, and found the cupboard beneath the sink partially open. Inside, behind some jars and a pile of old rags, was a wooden box, heavy, smooth from use. She hesitated, then pulled it free and opened the lid. A photograph lay on top. A woman, young and pretty, with soft eyes and a child on her lap, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. The boy had Daniel's eyes. There was no inscription, no date, just the image creased at the corners from handling. Charlotte stared, heartbeat rising. Who were they? Where were they? She heard the front door swing open and snap the box shut, slipping it back under the sink. Just before Daniel entered, his shirt was damp with sweat, and a trail of blood marked one arm. Just a scratch, but fresh. "Barbed wire," he muttered when he caught her glance. She nodded, silent, pretended not to have seen anything else. That night, as they sat at opposite ends of the table, the silence felt different. He was watching her now, not suspicious, curious, as if he could feel her questions stirring beneath the surface. Charlotte finally broke the quiet. "The wind here never stops." Daniel tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "That's how you know you're far enough from the rest of the world," he replied. She wanted to ask about the photo, the woman, the child, but again she stopped herself. Instead, she tried another path. "Do you ever miss it? The world outside?" He didn't answer right away. He chewed slowly, swallowed, then looked her dead in the eyes. "No." There was something final in the word, not cold, just shut. She nodded again and went back to eating. That night, she lay awake in bed. The image of the woman and the child burned into her thoughts. She wasn't just a runaway anymore. She was living in a house full of ghosts, and one of them, she suspected, still walked the halls. There were stories locked behind every door in this place, and soon, she feared, one of them might come looking for her. It was on a Tuesday that Charlotte first stepped foot into Duston Ridge. As Mrs. Cross, Daniel had handed her a list, scrawled in tight handwriting. Flour, kerosene, nails, coffee. No other instructions, just those 4 words and a silver coin. He didn't offer to come along, didn't ask if she knew where the store was, just hitched up the wagon, gave her the reins, and disappeared into the barn. The town looked different from the back of the wagon, less hostile, more curious. Faces peeked from windows. Conversation slowed as she passed. It wasn't malice, exactly. It was something more dangerous. Interest. At the general store, a bell rang as she pushed the door open. A heavy settee woman behind the counter looked up and blinked. "You must be the new Cross wife," she said, not unkindly. Charlotte forced a smile. "I suppose I am." "Well, that's something." Didn't think he'd ever try again. That caught her off guard. Again, the woman tilted her head. eyebrows rising. You mean he didn't tell you about the first one? Charlotte's fingers tensed around her list. No, the woman seemed to catch herself then, lips pressing together. Well, maybe that's for him to say. Charlotte finished her shopping in silence, the clink of coins and shuffle of footsteps louder than they should have been. As she stepped out, a voice called from across the street. Heard he found another one. An old man leaning on a cane spoke to no one in particular. Poor thing. She didn't look back, just climbed onto the wagon and urged the horses forward, her stomach turning. Back at the ranch, Daniel was chopping firewood. He didn't look up as she returned, didn't ask how it went, but as she passed him, she felt his eyes follow her. That night, she couldn't stay silent. The woman at the store, she said quietly as they ate. She mentioned someone else before me. Daniel froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Slowly, he set it down. We had a deal. His voice wasn't angry, just firm. I know, Charlotte said, but the town's already talking. I'd rather hear it from you. He stood and walked to the window, hands resting on the sill. For a moment, she thought he'd walk out. Instead, he spoke. Her name was Loretta. We married young, had a boy. Charlotte's heart jumped. The photo. They're gone, he said simply. And that's all I'll say. The room fell into silence again. But something in his tone, flat, unfinished, told her the story wasn't over. It had just begun. That night, Charlotte lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of a name she'd never heard now pressing on her chest. Loretta. The town remembered her. Daniel didn't speak of her. And Charlotte. Charlotte wasn't sure whose shadow she was really sleeping under. Days passed. The rhythm of ranch life settled into Charlotte's bones. Blistered hands, early mornings, and the constant hum of wind weaving through every corner of the house. But despite the routine, something between her and Daniel had shifted. He no longer avoided her gaze. He still said little, but when he passed her tools, it was with care. When she struggled to lift a heavy bale of hay, he stepped in silently, lifting it with one arm, then nodding once, as if to say, "You're trying, that's enough." Charlotte wasn't sure when the fear had begun to dull. Maybe it was the night he left a jar of honey on the table without a word. He'd noticed she couldn't drink her coffee without sweetener. Or the morning he returned from town with a tin comb and placed it next to her mirror without explanation. Small gestures, no words, but louder than anything he'd spoken. And then came the storm. It rolled over the plains without warning. Black clouds tearing across the sky like cavalry. Charlotte was feeding the chickens when the wind slammed against her like a wave, sending feed flying. She ran toward the barn, but the sky cracked open above her. Rain fell in sheets, thunder roared. She was halfway to the house when her foot caught a rut and she went down hard, ankle twisting beneath her. Mud splattered up her dress. Her cry was drowned in the storm, and then he was there. Daniel's arms scooped her up without a word. He carried her through the rain, face set, jaw tight. Inside, he set her on the kitchen table and dropped to one knee, rolling up her dress to the calf with deliberate care. Broken? I don't think so, she whispered. He examined the swelling, then moved to the cupboard and returned with a cloth and a bottle of whiskey. He didn't ask permission, just dabbed gently, wrapping her ankle with steady, practiced hands. Charlotte watched his face, the concentration, the worry he tried to hide. When he finished, he looked up at her, so close now she could see the stubble on his jaw, the flecks of amber in his gray eyes. You should have stayed inside. You should have told me there was a storm coming. She countered. A pause, and then just barely he smiled. It wasn't much, just the corner of his mouth twitching up, but it was the first time she'd seen it. She laughed, soft and disbelieving, and he said the most unexpected thing. You don't scare easy, do you? Charlotte blinked. Should I be scared? Another pause. Maybe, he said quietly. Not of me, just the life here. The silence between them shifted again, no longer thick with secrets. Now it buzzed with something else. Hesitation, hope, fear. That night, Charlotte stayed at the kitchen table long after he'd gone upstairs. Her ankle throbbed, but her heart beat faster than it should have. Graham Whitlock was a man of rules and walls, but for one moment, in the rain with his hands on her skin, she'd seen something unguarded, and it terrified her more than any locked door, because for the first time she wanted to be the one he let in. It started with the sound of hooves. Fast, aggressive, not the rhythm of a neighbor or delivery. Charlotte froze on the porch, a bucket of water in her hands. Dust curled in the distance as a single rider galloped toward the house. Her ankle was still tender, but her instincts sharpened. She set the bucket down and stepped back, just as the rider reined in hard, gravel spraying up from the road. He dismounted quickly, a man in his 40s wearing a bowler hat and a long coat. that didn't belong to this land, too clean, too polished. His eyes, however, were sharp as blades. "Evelyn Rosewood," he said before even tipping his hat. Her blood ran cold. She said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. He smiled, slow and calculated. "Thought so, been looking for you." She took another step back. "Who are you? Friend of your father's? Or used to be?" "Name's Victor Langley. He's been worried sick, you know. Said you went missing. Thought maybe something unfortunate happened." Charlotte's jaw tightened. Her past had caught up to her. "Whatever he paid you, it's wasted." "Didn't come for pay," Harlan said. "Came for leverage. See, your daddy still got enemies. And you, sweetheart, you're a walking piece of insurance." He moved closer. "You'll come with me now, quietly, or I make some noise this town won't forget." Charlotte didn't answer, because suddenly Victor Langley wasn't alone anymore. Daniel stood behind him, silent as a shadow, his revolver drawn, leveled steady. "Let her go." Mercer turned, startled. "Now hold on, friend." Daniel stepped forward. No warning shot, no raised voice. "You don't belong here. Get off my land." Mercer eyed the gun, then Charlotte, then slowly back toward his horse. "You're protecting her. You don't even know who she is." "I know enough," Daniel said. "She's a liar, a thief. Her whole family's rotten." Daniel cocked a hammer. "Poof. My land." Mercer mounted, hatred boiling behind his grin. "You'll regret this." And then he was gone in a cloud of dust. Charlotte stood frozen, her legs shook. She hadn't realized she was crying until Daniel holstered his weapon and turned toward her. "He'll be back," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He walked past her and into the house. She followed. Inside, he paced the kitchen once, then stopped at the cabinet beneath the sink. Without a word, he opened it and pulled out the wooden box she'd seen before. He set it on the table and opened it. There were more than photographs now. Letters, a birth certificate, a death notice. Her name was Loretta. He said, eyes not on her but on the boy in the photo. "My wife, my son, gone." Charlotte said nothing. Daniel reached in and pulled out a small toy horse carved from wood. "She said she was going to town. Took him with her. Never came back. I searched for weeks, months. Then I found out the truth." He looked up at her, voice barely audible. "She left. Ran off with a man from Tucson. Told everyone I was cruel, dangerous, that she feared me." Charlotte's heart broke. "Were you?" she asked softly. Daniel stared at her for a long time. "Not then." A silence settled between them, heavy but different now. No longer walls, just truth. Charlotte reached out and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. "You protected me today," she said, even without knowing everything. Daniel nodded. "Because I've been the one left behind and I won't do it again." Outside, the wind picked up, but inside the house, something finally settled. They were no longer strangers in the same house. They were two broken pasts, slowly learning how to fit. Charlotte woke before dawn, haunted by dreams she couldn't shake. A child's laugh echoing down a hallway, a woman's voice calling out in the wind. When she opened her eyes, the room felt colder than usual. Not from the weather, but from the weight of secrets pressing against the walls. Daniel hadn't spoken much since confronting Victor Langley. He'd retreated into himself again, not cold but distant, as if opening that box had drained something from him. She wanted to respect his silence. She did, but silence had brought her nothing but pain before. And this house, it held too many shadows. That morning, while Daniel was in the field repairing fence posts, Charlotte made a choice. She climbed the attic stairs. The latch had been nailed shut for as long as she'd been there, but today one of the nails was loose, just enough. She wedged the back of a spoon beneath it and pried gently, until the latch gave with a soft creak. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten grief. Light spilled in through a narrow window, illuminating shapes beneath canvas sheets. She pulled one back, a small cradle, another, a trunk, locked with a rusted clasp. Her breath caught. The lock gave after a few tugs, brittle with age. Inside, she found folded blankets, a pair of tiny shoes, a half-finished letter, and at the bottom, a journal. Loretta's name etched faintly on the cover. Charlotte hesitated, fingers hovering above it. Then she opened it. The entries were short, scattered, but clear. "Daniel is kind but distant. He doesn't talk about the war. Sometimes he looks at our son like he's remembering someone else." And then, one final entry, weeks before her disappearance. "I'm tired of waiting for him to see me again. There's a man in Tucson who says I deserve more. I think I believe him." Charlotte closed the book, her chest tight. Loretta had been lonely, unseen, but Daniel hadn't driven her away with cruelty. He had shut down, shut in, the war, the grief. It had built walls around him long before she ever left. And now Charlotte was climbing over those same walls, She heard the floor creak behind her. Daniel stood at the top of the stair. He didn't shout, didn't demand an explanation. Just looked at her, then at the open trunk. You were never supposed to find this. Charlotte rose slowly, meeting his gaze. I had to. I needed to understand who you were. Who you are. His jaw tightened, but his voice was low, quiet. I'm a man who lost everything, and who learned that questions just bring pain. She stepped forward. I'm not Loretta, and you're not the man you used to be. He looked away. How do you know? Charlotte's voice trembled, but she didn't falter. Because the man who pulled me out of the rain, who stood between me and a gun, that man still believes in protecting someone, even if he doesn't believe in himself. For a long moment, the attic was silent. Then Daniel took a step closer, just one. You shouldn't have come up here, and yet you didn't stop me. He let out a slow breath. Something shifted in his eyes. He reached past her and closed the trunk gently. Come downstairs, he said, not a command, an invitation. Charlotte followed him down, not because the questions were over, but because for the first time he was ready to start answering. The next morning, the house felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but alive. As if the walls had finally exhaled, Charlotte woke to the smell of frying eggs and the sound of a pan scraping over the stovetop. When she stepped into the kitchen, Daniel was already at the table, pouring coffee into 2 tin mugs. He didn't say good morning, but he slid a cup toward her. That was something. They ate in a silence that felt less like distance and more like recovery. Charlotte watched him closely, his posture still stiff but the lines around his eyes softer. There was no mask anymore, just a man, worn thin by loss and silence, still standing. After breakfast he spoke. You were right. Charlotte set down her mug. About what? I didn't stop you. Because I wanted to see if you'd still stay. After seeing all of it, she didn't hesitate. I'm still here. Daniel nodded. Then something strange happened. He smiled. A real one. Faint but unmistakable. But the peace didn't last. By late afternoon the dog began barking. Loud, sharp, alert. Charlotte stepped onto the porch just as a dark figure appeared at the edge of the property line. Victor Langley. He was back, and this time he wasn't alone. 2 other men rode with him, both armed. One tall and broad, the other wiry with mean eyes. Daniel appeared beside her almost instantly. Get inside, he said quietly. Charlotte shook her head. No. He looked at her. She held his gaze. I'm not hiding. Mercer stopped just short of the gate. You didn't think this was over, did you? He called. That little show the other day didn't settle things. Daniel stepped down from the porch. This is my land. You show up again, it's trespassing. You pull a weapon, it's war. Mercer laughed, dismounting with theatrical flair. She doesn't belong here. She's got people who want her back. Charlotte stepped forward then. They didn't want me. They wanted to use me. Mercer's smile faded. That's so. Daniel's voice dropped lower. You heard her. One of Mercer's men reached for his belt. Charlotte's heart leapt, but Daniel was faster. He drew his revolver in a blink, not firing, just aiming, calm and deadly. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. We're not going to do this here, Mercer muttered, backing away. He looked at Charlotte one last time. You think he's your savior? Just wait. Men like him always turn. Daniel didn't flinch. They rode off without another word. Silence returned to the ranch, heavy and electric. Charlotte turned to Daniel. He's not wrong, is he? About the kind of man you were. Daniel holstered the revolver, eyes unreadable. I've been a lot of things, he said. A soldier, a husband, a coward. He looked at her, really looked at her. But if I have any say in it, I'd like to be something else now. Charlotte stepped closer, her hand brushing his. You already are. They didn't kiss. They didn't speak. But in the dying light of day, with shadows stretching long across the land, something between them finally broke open. Not the past, not the pain, but the possibility of something more. The next days passed quietly. The men never came back. Whether it was Daniel's warning or Charlotte's defiance that drove them off, no one knew. But their absence left behind something rare on the ranch. Stillness. And in that stillness, Charlotte and Daniel began to breathe differently. They worked side by side in silence, as always. But now the silence wasn't a wall. It was a rhythm, a language, a kind of closeness that didn't need words. She found herself humming as she mended saddle straps. He let her lead the feeding, schedule without comment. At night he lingered at the table after supper, sipping coffee while she read aloud from the old journal she kept beside her bed. It wasn't romance in the usual sense. It was something slower, something earned. And then one evening, Daniel didn't go to bed first. He stayed on the porch after sunset, watching the stars emerge one by one. Charlotte joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. You know, she said, voice low, I used to think love looked like roses, and letters and a man who made grand promises. Daniel didn't speak, but now I think maybe it looks more like this, like not being afraid to sit beside someone in the quiet. A long pause. I made a lot of mistakes, he said, with Loretta, with my boy. I thought if I just didn't feel anything, nothing could break again. She turned to him. But pain doesn't go away just because you lock the door. He nodded slowly. You're not what I expected when I took out that ad. Charlotte smiled. You're not what I expected when I answered it. He looked over at her then, truly looked, and in that moment, she saw it. The man beneath all the scars, the weight he'd carried for years, the longing he never allowed himself to name. She reached out, gently took his hand. You're allowed to want again, Daniel. He looked down at their joined hands. I don't know if I deserve this. Charlotte leaned closer. Then let it just be grace. Something true, not owed. A soft wind stirred the prairie grass, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust. He turned to her, his voice barely audible. Thank you. For what? For staying. For not being afraid of what you found. She leaned her head on his shoulder. The truth is, I think I was running from something too. Not just my father. Not just the life he wanted. I was running from myself. From the fear that I was only valuable when I was useful to someone. Daniel exhaled slowly. You're not useful to me, Charlotte. She stiffened for a moment. Then he added, with a faint smile, you're everything to me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. In the silence that followed, nothing was broken anymore. No masks, no secrets, no shadows left untouched. Only two people, two pasts, two hearts, and the slow, sacred act of forgiveness. Spring arrived with little ceremony. The snowmelt from the northern hills crept down in silent streams, and the wildflowers returned like memories that refused to be forgot. The ranch breathed easier now, so did its owners. Charlotte stood by the paddock, watching Daniel teach a young colt to trust the rope. He didn't yell, didn't force, just moved slowly, patiently, letting the animal learn the rhythm of his presence. Once, she realized he had done the same with her, and she had stayed. The townspeople had changed too. No one whispered anymore. When she came in for supplies, some even greeted her by name. The woman at the general store handed her tea without asking, and the old man who once muttered, "Poor thing," now tipped his hat with quiet respect. Daniel never spoke of Loretta again. He didn't need to. Some griefs never leave you. They just stop shouting. Charlotte knew that kind of grief. She wore her own, like a ribbon tucked beneath her collar. But together they had stopped bleeding. That evening, as the sun melted into gold behind the hills, Charlotte brought 2 mugs of coffee to the porch. Daniel was already there, sitting in his usual chair, hat in his lap. She handed him the cup and sat beside him. He sipped, then said, I've been thinking about rebuilding the barn. You've said that for 3 months. He smiled. This time I mean it. She nudged him gently. I believe you. He turned to face her. And I want to paint the bedroom that yellow you like. She froze, surprised. You hate that color. Yeah, but you like it. Her throat tightened. You don't have to change for me, Daniel. He reached over and placed a hand over hers. I'm not changing. I'm choosing. Charlotte felt the warmth of his touch seep through her bones. He continued. This house, it's been stuck in the past. Locked doors, old boxes, dust. I want to open it up. Let it breathe. She nodded slowly. And what about us? He took a long pause. I don't have promises to offer you. Not the kind in fairy tales. But if you'll have it, I'll give you something better. She looked at him. What's that? His voice was low. A life shared. Honest, quiet maybe, but real. Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own answer. That night, they ate by candlelight, laughing over half-burnt biscuits, and the way the dog had dragged in a rabbit twice its size. No speeches, no declarations, just the steady unfolding of something neither of them had dared believe in again. And when the lamps were out and the stars spilled across the sky, Charlotte whispered to the dark, thank you for finding me. A deep voice answered softly from beside her. You found me first. Outside, the wind carried on, but inside the house that once held only ghosts, there was warmth, there was peace, there was love, and most importantly, there was no need for questions anymore. Only the quiet, steady comfort of the new promise they chose to build together. Sometimes the people we run from are not nearly as dangerous as the truths we run from within ourselves. Charlotte fled a world that tried to control her. Daniel locked himself in a world that tried to break him. But together, they discovered something neither of them expected. that love isn't loud or perfect. It's patient, it's quiet, and it often begins where the questions end. What did you take away from this story? Have you ever met someone who helped you see yourself differently, without needing to fix you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, and share what part of this journey moved you the most. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, and subscribe for more powerful tales of love, redemption, and quiet courage.